Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Huh.
This is where we take sources you're curious about, pull out the key insights, and basically give you a shortcut to getting informed.
Yeah, getting up to speed quickly.
Exactly. So today's mission, we're exploring this really quite engaging YouTube conversation. It's between two young Vietnamese individuals, Phu and CP, and they get into some stuff that feels, well, pretty universal, right?
Yeah.
Like navigating Gen Z pressures, how we see ourselves, and, that tricky thing of understanding between generations.
Absolutely. And it's more than just like a casual chat. It really opens a window, doesn't it, into their personal life.
It does.
They unpack things like societal expectations, that constant back and forth with self-doubt, what their parents hope for them.
Yeah, happiness too, that big one.
Right, what happiness even is, and how different generations maybe handle mental well-being differently. It's surprisingly deep.
Okay, so they kick things off with a game, Two Truths and a Lie. Seems lighthearted.
Yeah, on the surface.
But it kind of quickly becomes this interesting way for them to, show
Yeah.
parts of themselves. And one of the first things that really caught my ear was CP saying she doesn't feel like Kanaguta. Now, for listeners maybe not familiar, that roughly means like not feeling you're that ideal someone else's kid, right?
Yeah.
Even if you've actually done pretty well. What did you make of that?
Oh, that's such a great place to start. Because it immediately shows how these big pressures from society, from family, they're not just out there.
Right.
They get inside, they shape how you feel about yourself, even when maybe things look good on paper. That feeling of like almost measuring up.
But not quite.
Exactly. It feels very, very human. And CP gives examples, right? Even bringing up sort of outdated ideas about girls and education.
Yeah, she did.
Yeah.
It's a real reminder that these pressures, good and bad, they're still very much around. And they also touched on something I think, well, I certainly feel sometimes. This paradox of having so many opportunities.
Oh, yeah. The sheer number of choices.
On one hand, it's great, but on the other, it can just feel huge, overwhelming, this pressure to try everything, maybe.
That's a really good point. This abundance of choice.
Yeah.
It seems like a privilege, and it is, but it can definitely bring its own anxiety. You feel pulled,
Totally.
Does that feel like a uniquely Gen Z thing, do you think? Or maybe just a different flavor of what previous generations dealt with?
That's a good question. Something to chew on. So moving from those like external pressures, they then really dig into the internal stuff, confidence, doubt.
Right, how the outside shapes the inside.
Yeah. CP talks about finding confidence because she knows what she enjoys, especially seeing friends maybe still figuring it out.
Clarity of purpose.
But then Fu mentions taking a year off, to really step back and think about his path.
So, which is interesting, that contrast. Her confidence from clarity, his from like deliberate reflection. And he says something really powerful, doesn't he? About self-love being tied to accepting past pain, past failures.
Yeah, that was deep.
And he talks about happiness not being static, like getting into uni, big goal achieved.
And then feeling.
Yeah.
Kinda, yeah. That up and down, it feels very real.
So honest. And Fu even shares these really personal things, like feeling insecure about his smile, which CP kind of playfully teases him about.
Yeah, those little moments.
And then CP shares her stuff too, feeling like inadequate next to her super smart friends and how hard it is to even say that out loud.
Yeah.
That big me feeling she mentions.
Those vulnerable moments, they're so key, aren't they? Just shows you see the smile, but you don't know what's going on underneath.
For sure.
And Fu's story about applying for uni, putting in all the work, and being the only one of his close friends not to get into his first choice program, that really hits home, that gap between the outside and the inside.
Yeah.
And that leads them to this idea, maybe focus on your strength, like one profession for life is better than many mediocre ones. What do you think about that, especially now when we hear so much about being versatile? It's definitely interesting food for thought, isn't it? Given the pressure to be like a jack of all trades. Building on those internal struggles, they naturally shift to social media.
Yes. The comparison trap.
Right. How it just feeds those feelings of not being good enough. Everyone online just seems so perfect, polished.
Exactly. It's all curated, isn't it? This illusion of perfection. And it inevitably makes you compare and feel, less than. It's a huge external factor messing with the internal stuff.
Definitely.
Then they get really specific about expectations they've faced. CP as a TikTok creator.
Right. The music needing to match the image.
Yeah. And then just the general parental thing, wanting kids to be successful, make money.
And assuming that equals happiness.
That direct link.
And Fu's story, wow, being the only grandson, the weight of the family name,
Huge pressure.
and wanting to study far away, partly because of that, to find his own way. And his dad's reaction,
Hmm.
apparently quite dramatic.
Sounds like it. But they negotiated eventually, which says a lot about how those family dynamics can actually shift, even if it takes some drama.
True. And this leads them to tackle that label you hear sometimes, Gen Z, as like the spoiled generation.
Yeah, that comes up a lot. The argument usually goes, well, they have more opportunities, more financial stability than, say, their parents or grandparents did.
So they focus on higher needs, like self-actualization.
Right. But Fu and CP bring in this really crucial counterpoint about mental health, how older generations maybe didn't talk about it or even understand it in the same way.
Yeah, the stigma was huge, wasn't it?
Massive. Talking about mental struggles could literally mean being seen as, going crazy. So people suffered differently, maybe more silently.
So they're suggesting Gen Z seems to have more issues because they actually have the words for it. They're more aware, more willing to talk.
That seems to be their point. Not necessarily more fragile, but maybe just better equipped linguistically and emotionally to name what they're feeling.
Okay, that makes sense.
And they hold out hope, too, that this awareness could mean they handle things more empathetically in their own families down the line.
Which, if you connect that back, it really underlines why understanding between generations is so important. And communicating.
Absolutely. They
Right.
really stress empathy for older generations,
Sorry.
recognizing they were also products of their time, their pressures.
Yeah.
And I liked their point about shifting from thinking in terms of right and wrong to maybe suitable and unsuitable.
That's a good way to put it. More flexible.
Yeah, it allows for different perspectives without immediate judgment. Just feels more productive for dialogue.
And that dialogue, that open communication, seems like the key they keep coming back to. For bridging gaps, finding solutions that work for everyone. They even mentioned that movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Oh, yeah.
And how it sort of explores how even really intense love, unconditional love, can sometimes feel restricting if it doesn't leave room for who you want to be.
That's such a powerful parallel. And they're realistic, too. They admit, complete understanding. Maybe that's impossible.
Right. An ideal.
But what is possible and what really matters is being present, listening, offering support, and, finding those people you can actually go through this stuff with. That connection is rare.
Which actually leads really nicely into their next idea, connection itself.
Yeah.
CP does this little thing with a table and a glass.
Yeah, inanimate objects, but connected in that moment.
Right. Just show how everything's kind of linked. And then they apply that to generations we can connect. If there's openness, willingness.
Mm-hmm. And they draw this really useful distinction, too, between positive and negative expectations.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, positive ones can motivate you, right, spur you on, but the negative kind just create all this pressure, limit your freedom.
Gotcha.
And this is where they talk about the Vietnamese words hai vant and co vang. Hai vang is more like hope. It feels, lighter, more positive, less demanding. Whereas co vang is closer to our expectation, which can feel heavy.
Wow, that linguistic difference really clarifies it, doesn't it?
It really does. It shows how language itself shapes how we think about these things.
So focusing on hope instead of expectation, accepting failures, being present, gratitude, these are their tools, kind of.
Seems like it. Ways to navigate the pressure, and then the conversation gets super personal with their challenge part. CP does this rap.
Yeah, about its expectations.
Yeah, contrasting the battles of past generations with Gen Z's fight for self-definition. It's powerful.
Wow.
And then Fu calls his mom on the spot.
No way. What did he ask?
He asks her straight up, have you ever been disappointed in me?
Whoa.
And her answer is just immediate, emphatic, absolutely not, just pure, unwavering support.
Oh, man. That's really moving, especially after all the talk about expectations and wanting independence.
It really is. It shows that deep connection is still there.
So wrapping up this deep dive, we've really journeyed through this complex world of expectations, haven't we? The ones from outside, the ones inside, all through Fu and CP's very personal conversation.
Yeah, and we've touched on that crucial need for better understanding between generations and just the whole ongoing kind of messy journey of figuring yourself out, especially for Gen Z.
And by listening in on their honest talk, you, the listener, hopefully get a much richer sense of these things, right? Beyond just the headlines or generalizations, you feel the individual stories, the cultural nuances.
Definitely. It brings it to life.
Which leads us to our final thought for you. Thinking about everything we've explored today, all those pressures, those expectations, how might deliberately trying to cultivate hope, that high vonk, rather than just expectation, kovonk, how might that shift things in your own life, your relationships, how you see yourself?
It's definitely something to ponder. Maybe think about your own experiences with expectations and how you connect or maybe could connect better across generations.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. Until next time.